Republicans and Democrats just seem to have no clue about the real world, about you and me, about where our economy is going and our small businesses and what working families like the one I grew up in go through. And I just kept thinking, gosh, if I ever did my job like this, ignorant of substance and focused on conflict instead of collaboration, I would have been fired, and with good reason. So I asked myself, why do we accept this in Washington and nowhere else? And what can we all do to change it? And what can I do to change it? Because I'm a person that believes that complaining and rolling our eyes is not enough. We all have to jump in and be the change that we want to see. So I jumped in. Our incumbent Congressman Tom McClintock is absolutely everything that is wrong with Washington. He's been in politics for 40 years. He's taken in $4 million from taxpayers, and he's never passed a single piece of consequential legislation, never lived in our community, and is rated the 5th most partisan member of Congress. That is 430th out of 435 in actually getting anything done for us. It's time for him to go. But more than that, it's time for all of us to defeat this attitude that our government is a debating society or a pro wrestling match. Because we have real challenges in our community right now and in our lives, and we need to solve them. And we cannot stand this partisan dysfunction any longer. You know, for me, this is deeply personal. I grew up in a family that was deeply patriotic and where service ran through all of our blood. My family has served in nearly every American war since World War I. My dad got his family's first college degree through ROTC, and I grew up around a dinner table with two parents who debated politics. One of them was very liberal, and the other one was very conservative. So it was my job to bring them together. And I learned that there is much more that unites us than divides us. You know, I also grew up in a place where politics wasn't just a game. It actually mattered. In my town, we once had vibrant jobs. I grew up in kind of a working class factory town. But as I got older, plants closed and jobs left. And I saw schools go downhill, stores close, and crime come into the area. And a lot of people that I grew up with and I cared deeply about lost hope and really struggled to come out of that when that different generation of politicians forgot that their job is to fight for communities like ours, not fight against each other. As I got older, both of my parents got sick after they got divorced. My dad had good benefits from his contract as a teacher, so we never had to worry about his care, just his illness. My mother, who owns a Main Street store, just could never afford health care as a small business owner. And when she got sick, she and I navigated the complex, broken, and expensive healthcare system that we all face. It was terrifying and it was frustrating because when your family member, especially your parent, gets sick, you should spend time with them, not fighting the system. My family's stories are not unique. They are the stories of families all across our district and all across our nation. I have heard from so many of you anxious about losing your health care amid this pandemic, or losing protections for pre-existing conditions, or fighting with escalating costs. Meanwhile, Tom McClintock has voted 60 times to gut your health care and your Medicare. I will stand up for your health care, and I will fight to increase choice, to reduce costs, and to strengthen protections for pre-existing conditions. But we face not just a health crisis, we face an economic crisis. We have thousands of people whose jobs have been affected by this pandemic. We have small businesses struggling to make ends meet. We have parents balancing working from home and homeschooling. We have an unemployment rate in our district that is significantly higher than the one across the country. And we have infrastructure locally that is woefully out of date for the realities of today. We need leadership. We need energy. We need ideas to help us build back our communities stronger. But Tom McClintock just wants to talk. He doesn't want to actually do anything. In fact, he was the only member of Congress, Republican or Democrat from California, to vote against COVID aid for us. He mocks masks and he denies public health guidelines, which actually undermines us moving forward and opening our businesses and opening our schools. At a time when our seniors are stretched, he advocates to increase the retirement age and reduce benefits. I will stand up for your Social Security because I know that you have worked and earned it. And at a time when we all look outside our windows and we see catastrophic wildfires burning on our federal land, and we have home insurance losses across our community, McClintock sits on the Natural Resources Committee and does nothing to stop it, but he points fingers instead. Washington is not working for us. We are a community that stands together. We stand up together against a wildfire, against a pandemic, and we stand together against a government in Washington that has forgotten us. When a sports team or a business is not working, the first thing you do is you change the people in it. That is what I am offering this year. Change, new ideas to rebuild our economy, to attract jobs and investment to our communities. New energy to roll up my sleeves and do the work that we need to do to solve these problems and to fight for the issues that matter at your kitchen table. And most importantly, the opportunity for all of us to come together and to say, we reject the partisan games. We reject the performances. We reject playing to social media and cable TV hosts. And we are going to put people and progress first. I look forward to earning your support in November, and I look forward to answering your questions this evening. With that, I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight, my good friend and our Mariposa County Supervisor, Kevin Can. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Brynne, and thanks for that wonderful opening. You know, you give me a flashback there, as my mother was a Democrat, my father was a staunch Republican, and to this day, I think it pays me off in being sure that I am sensitive to all sides of the issues. Brynne, let me thank you for making yourself available for this open question format, and to all of you listening in, thanks for your interest, your time, and your questions this evening. And feel free to add in the chat box. I'll be watching that, or the process for emailing. We got a lot of great questions in. We have questions on forest management and fire, business, Second Amendment, politics, economic development, taxes, healthcare, and so I'm gonna sort of combine a few, and it goes without saying. Let's start off with forest management, fire, and fire insurance. 20 million acres of California are managed by the federal government. 20 million acres of forest land, mostly U.S. Forest Service, are managed by the federal government. What can you do to better manage our federal forests, given the disastrous wildfires we're seeing up and down the district? And a corollary with that, we've got fire insurance companies canceling rural populations left and right. This is disproportionately affecting District 4. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Kevin, thank you for the opening question. I know these are issues that you know a lot about and you and I have talked a lot about. So I'm glad that we are starting here. I'll start with the forest management side of this and then move on to the home insurance side of this. But I first just want to acknowledge everyone who has been impacted by our wildfires recently. It is an incredibly difficult time for our community. We have 5 fires burning right now in our district, and they actually are all burning on federal land. In fact, 80% of our forests in our district are federal land. So this is an issue that will be top of mind for me in Washington, and it is an issue that your federal representative should be doing much, much more on. So let's talk about what I will do. So firstly, I will make sure our Forest Service is funded. We need to invest in suppression as well as response. We need our Forest Service funded so we can manage our forests proactively. We can build the fuel breaks that are needed. We can do the prescribed burns where applicable, and we can get our forests to health. But that is not the only solution. We also need to partner with the private sector. We need to partner with our logging industry. We need to partner with our innovators. We have a lot of people in Mariposa and Madera County and up and down the Sierras that are innovating, that are helping to provide an end market as we remove the high-risk underbrush from our forests, whether it's wood pellets or it's small-scale biomass. And I know, Kevin, you've been involved in some of this. Those are the types of solutions that will get our forests to health and will also create jobs in our community. And not just any jobs, but jobs that are sustainable for the future, jobs where we can be a leader across our country in successful and modern forest management. That's the type of leadership that we deserve in Washington. What we've gotten from McClintock is someone who has been sitting on the Natural Resources Committee for more than 10 years, the very place where you could do something about this. Literally, if there is anyone who has been better positioned to make sure our forests on federal land are managed to health, it is Tom McClintock. And we have a situation right now that is dangerous. He is responsible for it. And we have to change our representation so that we can keep our community safe and we can take on this growing wildfire risk. Now, moving on to home insurance here, because that's another part of this. I will tell you that when we used to be able to do in-person events, I've met with many of you and your neighbors in other counties and heard stories of people losing their home insurance. I've met with people who were crying about their life savings at risk. And I've met with people who are very, very angry that our congressman has not brought this issue to federal visibility in many, many years. The first thing I want all of you to know is I will prioritize this issue. I will talk about it on the floor of Congress. I will call for a hearing with the CEOs and the leaders of those insurance companies who have pulled out of our market so that I can get to the bottom of why, understand what their risk models are doing that has pulled them out of the market or created dramatically higher premiums for all of you. I will work with the state to ensure that the FAIR Plan is an insurer of last resort that is reliable. And I will also work with the state to ensure that we can increase competition, that we can welcome new entrants into the market, so that people who know how to assess fire risk can create local insurance companies for our local communities and offer you more choice that brings down the costs. The other thing I want to do on this issue is work to get tax breaks for all of our homeowners who are making investments in their home, to harden their home, to upgrade your energy infrastructure, to remove vegetation around your property. These are things that I know you are spending money on, and we can't just have people spend money without giving anything back. So I want to work for tax breaks for all of you and also work for low-cost lending solutions where they may be needed.
Thank you very much. That's a situation that folks up and down District 4 are just grappling with, and it has long tentacles into the real estate business and our lives. We can manage the new construction, but there's such a crying need for home hardening, home retrofit, and clearing that folks need help with. So thank you very much for that.
You know, Kevin, my understanding is that this home insurance loss problem actually started right here in our district in Tuolumne County in 2014. Some of the first home insurance losses in the state of California. The interesting thing about this is that was 6 years ago. That's 6 years that Tom McClintock has not made this a priority, has not stood up and given a speech on the floor of Congress to make this a national issue, has not gone on TV or gone on the radio in any of his appearances and used his platform to fight for you, your investment, your home, and our community. That has to change. It has to change instantly. We have to solve this problem. We have to fight for everyone in our community who is experiencing this problem, because it is the majority of people in our community.
It surely is. Thank you very much. Hey, we're just going right for the tough ones here. I'll speak for
I'm pretty tough, Kevin. You know that by now.
I'll speak for myself in that I'm a lifelong hunter and competitive shooter, and hope that my children and their children can continue with that. And parallel with that, there's so much violence going on right now. A lot of folks are concerned about what you might do regarding their Second Amendment rights. There was an ad that we saw from the congressman that said you don't support the Second Amendment. Could you please speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully support the Second Amendment. I mean, it's total hogwash, whatever he's saying. I fully support the Second Amendment. I am a single woman. I very much appreciate the need to protect yourself, your family, your property, especially in this environment. And that's exactly why I will fight for our constitutional right, our Second Amendment. But I also appreciate that there's a lot of families that are also scared about their kids going to school safely, or walking into a place of worship safely, or walking into a store in our community. And that is why I also support background checks, something we already have in California, by the way, and investments in mental health to ensure that we're solving and identifying challenges in our local communities.
Thank you very much for that. I think that needed to be said.
Yeah, the challenge of our politics is you often don't get the opportunity to really respond to people's questions. I know that's something new for our community. My opponent rarely does sort of public events all across our district and takes questions. I'm very committed to doing that through the campaign and being your representative. So I like all the easy, the hard, the challenging questions, because that's actually how we connect as a community. That's how we get rid of biases. That's how we get rid of rumors on social media. And those are the very things that just tear us apart as people and Americans.
Thank you very much. Boy, well said. I have a couple that I want to combine on healthcare at this point. The first question is, are you for single payer healthcare, as in Medicare for All bill sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders, but also from Sandy, and she didn't note her town. Medicare is a high priority for my family. What will you do to save and improve Medicare services? Will you work to lower eligibility age? Will you try to expand services, coverage for prescription, mental health, dental care? What are your thoughts on the whole Medicare and healthcare situation?
Yeah, well, this is an issue where Tom McClintock and I very, very much differ. And I'm going to tell you how. The first thing I want to say, though, is I do not support Medicare for all. And here's why. We have a lot of rural hospitals, and we have a system that has been architected for many, many years. And I don't believe that we can blow up that system and solve it overnight. We have to build on the system that we have, whether we like it or not. That is the reality, and I will always tell you the reality and the truth. I will not pander to social media or cable TV hosts like my opponent does. I will always tell you the truth. So here's what I support, and here's what I think is possible. First of all, I will defend the Affordable Care Act. It provided health care to 20 million Americans and provided health care and protections for pre-existing conditions to 75,000 of our neighbors. My opponent has voted 30 times to overturn those very protections for pre-existing conditions that 75,000 of our neighbors rely on, and to gut the Affordable Care Act. I will stand up for it. I also would like to add a Medicare buy-in option to the exchanges. You know, you or I could elect to buy into Medicare at any time. It offers a low-cost way to unlock coverage to the 14 million people who don't have coverage today. It also is optional, and it does not increase our taxes by 1 cent. I think that's important, especially in an economic downturn. And I think it's a great way to unlock healthcare, to increase flexibility so that you don't necessarily have to be working in a job that provides you healthcare. You could buy into Medicare, and to do that without increasing anyone's taxes by 1 cent. Now, switching gears to Medicare as it currently exists, you know, the first thing is I've actually worked in the private sector, unlike my opponent, and I know what it is to wake up every day and to work hard and to earn your paycheck and earn your Social Security and your Medicare over many, many years. And I know that you need to believe and rely on politicians that is going to be there when you retire. And I will stand up for your Medicare and your Social Security and work to improve it, rather than advocating, as my opponent is, to increase the retirement age and reduce the benefits.
Thanks. And let's stay right on that business train there, train of thought. You talk a lot about smarter government and how your business background is important. What do you mean by smarter government?
Yeah, you know, the first thing I just want to say is, you know, I do talk about my business background a lot. And the reason for that is that our community is filled with small business owners. And I've actually walked in your shoes. You know, there's very, very few people in elected office in Sacramento or in Washington that have actually run a business in the state of California, that know how difficult it is, that empathize with what you go through day in and day out. 1 in 6 small businesses have failed during our pandemic, have gone out of business, struggling. 1 in 10 businesses that are started don't make it. Through hard work and grit and an incredible team, my business did make it and is going strong. But I know how hard that is and how hard you all work. And I will fight for you, for our main streets, for our business owners, for our workers in Washington. Now, it also gives me a foundation to think in a different way about things, because when you've been in government for 40 years, like my opponent is, you lose touch with thinking about things in a different way. You lose touch with reality. You lose touch with the community. And so when I think about our government, people always ask me, you know, do you support big government or small government, or right or left? And you know, I don't support any of those things. Those are silly words that tear us apart. What I support is good government, smart government. I support you knowing that your tax dollars are being used wisely and working to bring as much of that back to you. That takes transparent communication. That takes a representative that shows up and tells you what's going on in in-person events, in virtual events and videos. It takes a team like I will have with representatives all across our different counties. It takes a website that is modern and visual and doesn't look like it was built in 1990. You know, those are all things that I will be doing for constituent services to increase the communication, increase the transparency. But also in Washington, we very often reinvent the wheel. You know, we start over again. We build on things. We don't learn. And that takes your tax dollars into things that are not efficient. So I am advocating for things like auditing all of our federal agencies to make sure your tax dollars are being used wisely. I support a moratorium on any congressional pay raise until Congress, myself included, can articulate to you clearly how your tax dollars are being spent. And I support reducing duplicative regulation and working as hard as we possibly can to reduce taxes. That takes work. And those are the kinds of things that I learned in the private sector. You know, a good example of where we reinvent the wheel is when we look at something like privacy legislation. We have a lot of challenges and a lot of questions right now about all the data we're entering into the internet, where it goes, how we can be protected, what companies should do to make sure our personal data is protected. In Europe, they have more stringent data protection regulations. And in fact, all of our businesses in the US who operate internationally had to go through upgrades to their policies and how they use personal data over the last few years to comply with the European guidelines. But instead of saying, what did the businesses already do to invest to increase their privacy guidelines to meet the European standards, we say, let's start all over again and create additional costs for our businesses. This is just one example of the type of thing that happens from government that erodes your faith, that people get frustrated by, that people feel like their tax dollars aren't being used wisely. And I bring that lens, that experience to look at the government in a smarter way and fight for your tax dollars and articulate transparently what is happening.
You know, I love the flow of the questions here. And that leads right into the next question, which I'm not grading them, but so far it's my personal favorite.
I thought your personal favorite was the Second Amendment.
Well, that was. Now this one.
We also all want to know how well you did at your shooting competitions.
Oh, another story. So this caller says, my Republican husband thinks any Democrat's personal position doesn't matter because they'll end up doing whatever Nancy Pelosi says. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, honestly, that's a question that I hear all the time, and sometimes people don't say it in such a kind way on social media. You know, here's what I'll say. This is everything that is wrong with our government today. And this is everything that is wrong with career politicians. You know, I am not a politician. I am not someone who graduated from college and started working as a staffer and kind of climbed my way up in a political party. I am someone who worked in the real world, just like you all do, who built a business very successfully by working with people with all different views and all different ideologies, and by standing up to very powerful people who sat on my board or who were investors in my company. That is not experience that you find from most politicians, and it means that I have the courage and the experience to stand up to anyone and to make decisions in the interest of our district, not in the interest of any political party. If you want a deep partisan, if you want someone who graduated from college and started as a staffer and climbed his way up a political party and swam his way through the swamp of California politics to run for absolutely every single office in our state, in Southern California and Northern California, then you should vote for my opponent, because there is no one who is more partisan in our politics today than Tom McClintock. If you want someone who will represent our community, who has a campaign that is a coalition of Republicans, Democrats, and independents, whose very philosophy is to stand back and reject partisanship, then you should vote for me. Well, and by the way, if you don't believe me, you should vote for someone else in 2022 then. If you don't believe me, you should let me show you what it is to have someone in Washington who puts community over party, and let me prove it to you. Because I can tell you this as much as I want, and I get this question all the time, but I know that there is still skepticism from some people, and you are only going to believe it when you see it. So you should vote for me. And then if I don't live up to what I'm saying, you should vote for someone else in 2022, because I'm confident that I will change your mind.
Thanks very much. You mentioned a little bit of academic background. We have a couple questions folks are interested in. What's your academic background?
Well, I studied history in college, actually. So I'm a big believer in studying history to to learn and make decisions in the present. So that's what I studied in college. And then I got an MBA. So I went to business school, and it was actually during my MBA that I started the business, Topia, at my kitchen table that over the next decade grew to be very successful.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's dig back in to the
was that the intermission, the easy one?
Yeah, that was the softball. Immigration. Immigration's on many people's minds right now. It's on the national mindset. DACA, where do we go with this? What's in our future? Where do you want to take us?
Look, immigration is a perfect example, just like talking about the Second Amendment, is what I call a false choice. You know, if you listen to the cable news media or both political parties or my opponent, you'd be led to believe that these are very binary things, that I'm this, you know, this person that's going to do something, you know, that might upset some people. You know, these are not issues like that. You know, my opponent articulates this as it's either open borders or it's, you know, on the other side, it's kids in cages. You know, no one really supports any of those things. Everybody knows that reforming our immigration system starts with a strong border. That is what I support. I support making investments to strengthen our border, investments in technology, investments in border agents, investments in physical barriers where needed. I also support an immigration system, immigration reform that puts families and our communities first. I support providing a path to citizenship for children who were brought to our country by no fault of their own and grew up here. I support bringing those people out of the shadows who are contributing to our communities and paying taxes so that they can be full Americans. And I support deporting those who commit crimes and are here illegally and commit a crime. I also support an immigration system that supports our local economy. You know, a good example of this was the Farm Modernization Act, which was a bill that was in Congress in December. This is a bill that was overwhelmingly supported by the Farm Bureau, by our neighbor to the north of our district, Del La Malfa, a Republican, by many Democrats, and it would have helped our community, our agriculture industry. And Tom McClintock voted against it. You know, he's consistently out of step with our community. He's consistently focused on conflict and sowing division and presenting false choices to everyone and creating fights between neighbors and friends instead of actually solving problems. We can reform our immigration system if we have people in Congress who are ready to work for each other, ready to be pragmatic, and ready to solve problems. And that is who I am.
Thank you very much. I'm going to shift over to a little bit of economic development throughout District 4. I mean, most District 4 counties rely on tourism to some degree, most not to the degree that Mariposa County does, where we get 3 times the revenue from hotel tax than we get from property tax. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts on District 4 economic development?
Well, you know, Kevin, you make a good point. We actually have 14 million tourists a year that come to our district. About 4 of those go to the areas around Yosemite. About 10 million go toward the Tahoe Basin. So, you know, all over our district, tourism is the engine of our economy. You know, people come to our district, they visit the parks, they go hiking, they go camping, they spend money in local stores and local restaurants and local coffee shops. And this is absolutely something that we need a representative who recognizes and who fights for. You know, a good example, again, of legislation that would have helped our local economy and our tourism industry is the Great American Outdoors Act, which was passed a couple weeks ago, or I guess maybe more like a month ago now. Again, an overwhelmingly bipartisan bill that provided a lot of funding for our federal lands and our national parks. In fact, provided funding for a lot of the maintenance backlog in Yosemite. I think there's about 680 million of maintenance backlog in Yosemite, and this bill unlocked the funds for that. It was supported by about 83 senators, the majority of the House of Representatives, and President Trump. And one of the only people to oppose it is the very person who represents Yosemite and this tourism economy, and that is Tom McClintock. Again, consistently out of step with our community, to the extent that I've heard from many of our counties that they actually hired people whose sole responsibility was to encourage him to vote for this bill. And he still voted against the wishes of our local elected officials, of our economy, and of our parks. We have to change this. We have to have a representative who fights for our jobs, for our economy, and for our community. And that is exactly who I will be.
So that leads us again right into the question of any chance that we can see 1, 2, 3 debates between you and the incumbent?
I will just say stay tuned. If you look at Brynne Kennedy for Congress on Facebook, we provide regular updates on what's ahead, so keep an eye out. You can also go to brynneforcongress.com where you'll see more about the campaign and a lot of in the press section, upcoming events or things that are happening. So stay tuned.
When I saw the immediate smile on your face, I think I can guess what your position is on whether or not you should have a debate. Jumping over into rural broadband, the pandemic has caused workers and students to work from home. Our connectivity is unreliable and expensive. How can access be improved?
Yeah, I've heard so many stories from people about the lack of broadband connectivity in our community. I mean, I heard many, many stories and many asks about this before the pandemic, but I've even heard stories of kids sitting with their parents in cars in parking lots to connect to the Wi-Fi at a library or a coffee shop to download their schoolwork during this pandemic. I mean, we have to solve this. This is totally unacceptable in America in 2020. This pandemic has exposed so many types of inequality tied to connectivity. It's exposed the education inequalities, as I just referenced. It's also exposed inequalities in healthcare access. We have a lot of people doing telehealth now, whether it's for physical health appointments or mental health appointments. We have people reliant on news about wildfires or emergency alerts from the internet and who may not be able to get them. I mean, this is scary, scary stuff, and it has to be solved. I believe that broadband is the highway of the 21st century. I'm a big supporter of infrastructure investment for our communities, and broadband must be at the center of any infrastructure legislation that we pass. It is something that I will fight incredibly hard for because I know that is the foundation of job opportunities, of education opportunities, of healthcare, and of basic day-to-day living for so many people in our community. Incidentally, my opponent feels differently and voted against us receiving grants for rural broadband in the past. I will not only take grants that help us to provide connectivity, but I will work to lead on this issue because that is how important I believe it is and how regularly I hear it from all of you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to an extremely timely question. The question itself is, do you support the concept of expanding the Supreme Court? But even more specifically, I think folks would be interested in your thoughts on the Supreme Court today.
Well, I do not support expanding the Supreme Court. I am a student of history and I am a student of the foundations of our nation. I think that we all need to work to push back on the partisanship that has hijacked our country. But I don't think that we change the system. I think that we change the people. I think it is the people who are in Congress today who have created this deeply toxic, divisive, partisan environment, including surrounding the Supreme Court. And I think that what we need to do is we need to bring change to Washington, people that are ready to work together again as they did in other eras to represent communities and to move our country forward. We can do our part in our community by defeating a deep, deep partisan this year. And I'll need you all to hold me accountable for working with everyone and bringing people together. We all need to do that. And I will hold you accountable for working with each other and talking to each other and talking to your friends and neighbors in our community that may have a different view than you do. Those of you who know me well and maybe on the call know that I always say, this is all of our jobs. It is all of our jobs to bring our community together, to challenge ourselves, to try to understand other people's perspectives and to find common ground, to be Americans before we're Republicans or Democrats. That is what I support.
Thank you. The folks keep bringing in just excellent questions here, and I'm gonna throw two big ones together and let you tackle it how you'd like. The first part of the question is how do you plan to ensure the continued success of California agriculture and anything that might be specific to District 4, but specifically in the face of global climate change? A couple easy ones there.
That's a great question. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is defeat a congressman who denies the consensus around climate change from our government leaders, our scientific community, our business community, and our national security community, and make decisions based on data, not decisions based on retweets and cable TV posts. I think that's what all of our community, and not least of which our agricultural community, deserves. And that's the kind of representative that I will be. I think there's a lot of things that we need to work on. I will always make sure that we have sufficient water for our agricultural industry locally, rather than selling it out to the highest bidder to other parts of the country or other parts of the state. I think the representative of our district should represent our businesses, our community, our agricultural industry, not pander to donors that are in other places, as my opponent does. I will work to reduce regulation that is duplicative and impacts the ease with which you may be able to run your businesses as a fellow business owner, although be it in a different space. But I do appreciate how challenging it is to run a business of any kind in California. And I will support bipartisan legislation like the Farm Modernization Act that provides for the workers and the support and the investment that I know our community needs. And I will listen to the Farm Bureau and our agricultural community for what you all do need. Because I think that's the foundation of being a representative is listening, is taking your views back to Washington and getting on a plane every week and fighting like heck for you on the floor of Congress and, in the back rooms to make sure that your issues are a priority, and then coming back and telling you what is and isn't possible. But that communication loop and that fight and that listening is so broken today with McClintock because he just doesn't show up. He doesn't live here. He doesn't do events like this. In fact, I even hear from many of our elected officials that he doesn't meet with them. And I want to change that very, very quickly.
Thank you very much. We have a broad array of questions regarding your support of veterans health needs, veterans services, and I will tell you there's a good bit of angst over the recently reported president's comments about our soldiers and assigning unsupportive names to folks that allow themselves to be out representing this country as, and I'll just say it, the question is suckers and losers. I think that puts a hole in the stomach of all of our folks who have so supported our veterans. And folks want to know what your position is.
Well, I stand with our veterans and our active duty service men and women fully. For me, this is deeply, deeply personal. My family has served in nearly every American war since World War I. In fact, my great-grandfather, it was served in France with, I think, some of those folks that were criticized in those comments. And my dad got a college degree, the first in his family, with the support of our OTC. It is literally why I am sitting in front of you today, is the support of our military. I will always remember that. I stand up for our veterans and our active duty servicemen and women, and I will always fight for all of the support that you need. Now let's talk about veterans services. I support modernizing the VA. Again, we talked about some of the smarter government ideas, but similarly bringing my business background to modernize the VA, make it easier to interact with. I will stand up for your benefits and work for greater investment in things like mental health, because again, this is deeply personal for me. I have a family member who came back from Vietnam with a lot of challenges, a lot of PTSD. And I know personally that we need greater investments in mental health support for our veterans, and we need Congress people that stand up for the people who have served our nation in uniform. My opponent seems to feel differently because he has nothing to say about our veterans right now, and throughout his career has criticized our all-volunteer military, calling it a dismal failure at one point, and consistently voting against widows of military members, voting actually even 3 times against healthcare for 9/11 first responders. It's a theme with him that he puts party above people, regardless of who they are and regardless of how they serve our country. I respect your service and I will stand up for you.
Thank you very much. I'll shift gears again. It's hard to live in California for more than about a week without realizing that there's a housing crisis in California. There's a housing crisis in District 4. When Mariposa County did its strategic plan or redid its strategic plan a year or so ago, the housing for our service level workers and affordable housing is our #1 priority. It's the #1 thing that drives the quality of staff we are able to hire. And I know that is repeated in different scenarios from the top to the bottom of the state. Any thoughts on the housing and affordable housing and the shortage?
Well, it's not just Mariposa County, Kevin. You know, all of our counties have similar challenges, and I look forward to working with our supervisors on this issue going forward, and our state representatives. You know, it's a problem that our state faces because it's so costly to build housing in California. It actually costs close to $500,000 to build a single-family home, an average single-family home in California. 36% of that is regulatory and permitting costs. It's actually not that complicated, I think, to figure out why no one's building affordable housing if the cost of building it is almost $500,000. You know, they would lose money out the back door if if that's the cost. So what I support is permitting and regulatory breaks for building at the affordable level. I also support tax incentives for developers who build at the affordable level. And I support working with our local governments to look at zoning to make it more possible to build the type of affordable housing that I think many of our communities may want. This is something that we have to do. We have to make it cheaper and easier to build at the affordable level. Otherwise, no one's going to build at the affordable level, and our communities all suffer. So those are things that I look forward to working with our state and our local governments on, applying pressure where needed and collaborating where needed. Because, Something I also say often for those of you on the phone who have met me before and know me is government is a team sport. It might not feel like it right now when it feels like we have two teams that don't want to talk to each other and it feels like we have a representative that's, somewhere else. But the reality is that government is a team sport for our communities. It does not matter what it says in front of your name. It does not matter what level of government you are. I deeply believe that we all need to collaborate to serve our community, to share information, to get the funding to the right place, and need to unlock that much more, break down those silos. And in fact, I've already started that by doing leadership council calls with our supervisors and city council members across different counties so they can share information and we can get to know each other a little bit. And it's that foundation that I will build upon as the federal representative to serve you all with one single team.
This is great. I need to let folks know that we're running up towards 7 o'clock. We'll probably do a couple more questions, but I get the feeling that the questions could come for another 2 hours and you could answer them for another 2 hours. And I'd like to go now to what draws you to District 4? What folks want to know why now, and then if elected, how are you going to stay in touch with the constituents of District 4?
Well, I live in Roseville, which is in South Placer County and a part of our district. We've never had a representative in 12 years who's actually lived in our district. I chose to make my life in our community because I love it. I love the access to the outdoors. I love the strong communities that remind me of my upbringing. And I love the spirit of all of you and my friends and neighbors and my cousins who live here. So I decided to jump into this race because I thought that our community needed someone who lived here and who cared about it, that our community deserves someone who will put political parties aside and put the people of our area first. And that's exactly what my campaign is about. It's why I have the support of more than 75 nonpartisan local elected officials who come from all party backgrounds, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And it's something that Tom McClintock has never been able to provide us. He's never chosen to live in our community or be a part of it. And he doesn't even have a fake P.O. box, actually. And that is just silly because we have this incredibly special community. We are resilient, we are strong. We have these incredible natural resources, Yosemite and the Tahoe Basin. We have 40% of California's water. We have the area where gold was discovered. We have fast-growing suburbs and small towns with deep history. We have some of the best wine in the world. We have this incredibly diverse, special place. Could you imagine not wanting to live here? I can't. So let's talk about how I'm going to communicate with our community going forward. People often ask me, what are your priorities when you win? What will be your priorities in Congress? And I think about the job with two sides. There's a legislative side, and we talked about some of the priorities tonight, but there's also a constituent services side. And my first priority before I even get to Washington in January is to build up a framework and a foundation for great constituent services and communication. It will be a website that is modern where you can regularly get information and updates and communication about what's going on in Washington and to the extent that I can communicate where your tax dollars are being spent. It will be recruiting and building a team that lives in our community, cares about our community, and is spread across our different counties because we are diverse. And we do have a lot of counties. We need local staff members who know the local issues and you can access easily. And then I will publish a town hall schedule that will be regular and public so that you know where you can come to ask me questions, to hold me accountable for things, and to share your perspectives so that I can take them back to Washington. Those are all of the different ways that I will communicate to you. And I really look forward to showing you, with your help in November, what representation can look like and how it can function in a different way, because we've just been woefully underserved for so long. I'm excited to work with my staff and all of you to restore the faith in representation.
I can assure folks that Brynne has not seen the questions in advance, and I'm going to prove that right now. We're going to go out with a bang. Folks want to know your position on the Green New Deal.
I thought you were going to ask me like my favorite song or my favorite food or something like that to go out.
I wish.
So I do not support the Green New Deal, but I do support that climate change is real and that we need some solutions for our future. But let me talk to you about what my solutions are. They come in two forms. One is infrastructure investment, and the other is unlocking the power of the private sector to solve problems. So we have to invest in upgrading our infrastructure. If we do that, it can create the foundation to take on climate change. More roads, less driving. Better broadband, less commuting. Better public transport, less driving. Upgrading our energy grids, we can reduce carbon emissions. You know, there's all kinds of things. We need to look at our manufacturing infrastructure. We need to do this with an infrastructure package that is designed in an intelligent way and that is financed by a combination of the private sector and the public sector. And to do that, I support building an infrastructure bank that our local governments can borrow from at the same rate that other folks can borrow from the Fed at, and we can fund it in a creative way. The other side of this is the private sector. I believe in the power of American ingenuity. I've seen it. I've seen and had the opportunity to interact with some really incredible people that have solved some really deep problems. And we've seen it throughout our nation's history. You know, we put a man on the moon, we created the internet, we created this platform that we're using to communicate with each other tonight. And I think that it is going to take the framework and the support of the public sector, and it is going to take the ingenuity and the investment of the private sector to solve a problem of the scale of climate change. So I support incentives, tax incentives, to attract innovation, to attract capital, to create technologies that we need for carbon sequestration and other things that can help us take on climate change. And it is false that the government can solve this problem. It has to come from each and every one of us. It has to come from the brilliance across our nation. It has to come from you and me having the infrastructure to change the way that we may operate. And it has to come from a government that acknowledges that the data is real and creates a tax framework to unlock that great American ingenuity.
Thank you so much for your passion and your answers to these questions. I feel like I've gotten to know you a lot better, and I really thank the folks as I get ready to hand it back to you to wrap up here. I want to thank the folks for their questions, spending their time on a Saturday evening. I want to apologize. There are so many more questions that came in while we were speaking. I think there's a lot of folks that tuned in, but I will say that your comment on the great wine in our district gave me a great idea for as soon as I hit that leave button.
Well, we'll finish with a personal anecdote. I'll finish with a personal anecdote also, Kevin. I wanted to share with everyone that Kevin and I actually first met about 1.5 years ago on Easter Sunday in downtown Mariposa at church with some very dear friends of mine celebrating the holiday. And I'm very glad that we did, Kevin. And thank you for being a part of our event this evening.
My pleasure.
So to all of you, thank you for joining tonight. You know, this campaign is about each and every one of you. It is about our community. It is about what we are going through as a community. It is about those wildfires outside. It is about the challenges of our small businesses. It is about the people who have been affected by COVID. It is about the seniors whose Social Security and Medicare is being assaulted by my opponent. These are not Republican or Democratic issues. And anyone who tells you that has been in politics way too long or is getting paid way too much to be a cable TV host. These are issues for America, for our community. And we need to look at them that way. That is how I look at them. That is how I will represent you. I will bring us together to solve problems. If you like what you hear tonight, I really, really hope to earn your vote in November. If you want to help us to win this election, it is a tough fight, and it is a worthy fight, because Tom McClintock has been in government for 40 years, for 10 plus years representing us, and look what we got. We got wildfires. We got no rural broadband because he denied it. We got denying a virus and voting against aid for us. If you want to help us do something incredible for our community, then please go to brynneforcongress.com and sign up to get involved or donate, because this campaign is built on the donations of individuals, not corporate PACs like McClintock has. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim Munson, also from Mariposa County, to tell you guys a little bit about what it's like to volunteer and to work on a campaign like ours.
Good evening. As she said, my name is Kim Munson, and I'm a volunteer leader with the Mariposa, Madera, and Fresno parts of our district. I live in Mariposa, and I'm a retired high school teacher. Wasn't Brynne inspiring? To hear her speak is to feel represented, to feel heard. And I'm confident that when she is elected to Congress, she will make time to hear all of her constituents, be they Republicans, Democrats, or any of the myriad political identities that make up our American system. The last time Tom McClintock had a town hall in Mariposa was over 3 years ago. He didn't like the questions he was getting, so he left early, and he hasn't been back. Brynne will hear us all, even our criticisms, and will work with everyone. This is important to me because I live in a two-party household. My husband is a Republican and I'm a Democrat. It has been difficult to live together during the last 4 years. We don't even discuss politics anymore. So I'm thrilled with Brynne's determination to be bipartisan and to represent us all. And I'm praying that the nation follows her lead. It's funny, when I volunteered to provide dinner to the homeless on Monday nights with the help of a team of high school students, we didn't ask for their party affiliation. We wanted to take care of just this small need. And it didn't matter if they voiced an opinion on politics, and trust me, they did. Our job was to make them feel valued regardless. Brynne comes to us to apply for this job in the same spirit. She wants to be of service. She has been demonstrating that desire ever since she moved here. She helped gather supplies and bring them to fire victims during this fire season and last. And when COVID-19 virus hit, she gathered personal protective equipment for various hospitals in our region. She and her staff have helped individuals having trouble with accessing government benefits when Tom's office turned them away. I say we should hire her. But I must tell you that voting for Brynne, while crucial, it just isn't enough. We desperately need that most valuable of commodities, your time. We need you to give us at least 2 hours of time every week for a mere 6 weeks to ensure that people know who our candidate is and what she stands for. The ballots will be coming out soon, so we need you to talk to people and make sure that they have a plan for voting in this difficult time, to help them get their ballots if necessary. And we need you to donate a few dollars to help get that message out. But remember, money is important, but it's really your time that's the most valuable to Brynne. Please go to brynneforcongress.com, click on the events tab, and sign up for one of those events. You know, we've all been working hard, and it's paid off. We feel like we've accomplished something in reaching thousands of people by phone. And we need you to do it too. Please do it tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate that. And thank you to all of you for joining tonight. You guys have a really great Saturday night. Please go to brynneforcongress.com. If your question didn't get answered tonight, you can also email it to info@brynneforcongress.com, or feel free to reach out to me directly at brynne@brynneforcongress.com. And keep your eyes peeled for subsequent events, which might give you the opportunity to ask more questions. Thanks so much, and here's to the future.